New York.
Apple.
Hot dogs.
Dollar.
Hollywood.
Democracy.
Freedom. Rock and roll. Wall Street.
Statue of Liberty.
Los Angeles, California.
McDonald's.
Jeans.
Bubblegum. Video games. Nintendo.
What's so great about America?
Every Saturday night, 7 to 9 p.m., explore American culture and language.
With Master Steve,
Ina MK,
And Hazva Cutie.
tune in to find out about what makes America so great.
The Great American Weekend. Listen exclusively on Radio Van 103.1.
Also, watch us on the Radio Von Facebook page, website, and mobile app.
And we are here to say that we're back in this cozy studio with our new English language show, The Great American Weekend. Good evening, dear listeners of
Hello,
Radio.
everyone.
Hello,
Van.
world. We are free. We are free at last.
Hey,
I am
Steven.
feeling so chill with that music that just brought us in.
I love that song. I mean, seriously, Nina Simone, she just melts my heart. And that song, too, there's a live version of that song, too. It's just amazing, so impactful.
And
just
why did
real.
we put that song? Because our episode tonight is about freedom and
a Black History Month. This month of February is Black History Month, and we'll be discussing both the topic of freedom, what it means to us and how it's defined, and kind of discussing what it means, and also what Black History Month means for Americans, for American history, and some major contributors of African American origin to America's development as inventors and other important figures that have kind of changed the landscape of what civil rights looks like.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've changed the face of American history and even of world history.
But before we start, let's remind about us. Tonight, till 9 p.m. In the studio, there
You're
will
stuck
be...
with us.
Yeah, you're stuck with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome into our...
Hazva Cutie, Master Steve,
And
Ina
MK.
Yes. We're here to share with you interesting stuff, history, culture, a bit slang, and
I'm really excited about this show, actually.
Yes,
Because
yes,
I'm
we are.
curious about the discussions that we'll come up with.
and also we're gonna have our second guest. So don't miss this episode because later on we're gonna host Raffi Ouzounian.
A very special guest. Yes, Raffi Ouzounian, writer and world traveler for the past 5
he
years.
definitely knows what freedom is.
Oh, I don't know anyone who lives as free as he does right now. The man has quite inspirational stories, I think. Personally, I think. I'm really going to be curious about picking his brain about how he sees freedom.
Also, guys, if you want to watch us live right now, you can go ahead and tune and join our live broadcast, which is on our Facebook page.
Yes. Hey, you listening on the radio. We've also got a live link on Facebook. Open it up. Take a look. Watch us.
And you, who might be sitting in front of your computer with your Wi-Fi.
That's right.
Who
you.
might be leaving the house before 9 o'clock. Hey, you can tune us in on the radio, 103.1, and listen while you're out.
Or in your cars on the way to somewhere, wherever you guys are going.
Tell that taxi driver as soon as you get in and sit down, 103.1.
Radio Van #1. Okay.
We're like an outlet over here. We're just all plugs.
Okay, so can we start with this Wikipedia explanation of freedom? Can I just read it out really quickly?
Go for it, Ina. I'm really curious what Wikipedia
Thank you,
has
guys.
to say.
So Wikipedia says freedom generally is having an ability to act or change without constraint. A thing is free if it can change its state easily and is not constrained in its present state.
So, and I'm going to stop you there because
Okay.
I'm going to drop a quote on you guys from probably my favorite philosopher.
Go ahead,
Martin Heidegger.
bombard us.
German. But he says dictionaries, and, when you look up the word freedom on Wikipedia, you're using it as a dictionary. Dictionaries have very little to say about words when they're used thoughtfully.
In context.
So, yeah, thank you, Ina, for
Nice.
the dictionary
Yeah.
definition. But what does that mean? And how does that apply to anything in real life?
Yeah, what does that mean? I'm curious, actually.
What? The freedom?
Yeah, well, I mean, how would freedom be contextualized in a different way? Because the first thing I think of when I listen to this definition is that this can apply to a human being. It can apply to, let's say, an animal, or it could apply to even like a particle, like a free radical, let's say, or like like an atomic.
Let's not get into quantum physics today. I haven't studied up
Sure,
on
I
it.
just mean it's interesting how
We're
this.
not ready, Aramas.
Sure,
QT, Hazva.
I think that it's interesting that this concept of freedom has these multiple contexts that it can be applied to. But here today, we'll be talking about the human context of it and
of course.
freedom.
Can I say something? Because freedom, I guess, means more than just doing whatever you want, whenever you want. Because
Does it?
because it can just cause anarchy, and so how to differ freedom from this chaos?
Well,
I love anarchy.
See, but what is anarchy?
I think anarchy in itself inherently has the concept of total freedom baked into it, and freedom from the regulations and rules and rule of law set upon by an institutionalized government. And the civil rights movement, in some ways, had anarchistic. Is that a word?
No.
Anarchic
I don't
qualities
think
too,
so.
because it went against institutionalized rules and regulations that seemed unfair to the people who felt oppressed by those laws.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anarchy traditionally, and then the Russian nihilism is kind of the same thing. It was a political movement before the Bolshevik Revolution. Actually, I think before the turn of the century. It was the idea that the problems between people and nations and everything, basically all of the world's problems, come from organizations and governments and institutions like that. So if we get rid of all of them, then everything will just be peaceful and harmonious. So a lot of people, I mean, Ina, I think the way that you used the word anarchy was chaos, destruction, just madness. Right. For someone who actually believes in anarchy, that's not it. For someone who actually believes in the political concept of anarchy, we get rid of all those things and everyone will just come together and be peaceful.
So that's again another freedom to think whatever you want to think and define whatever you want to define in your own way.
So can I tell you what my favorite definition of the word freedom? Yes,
you can do it, but right after the advertisement break.
I love
advertisements. We are not free from advertisements. Not yet.
We are slaves to our corporate sponsors. Thank you very much to our sponsors for giving us the opportunity to be doing this radio show.
This is the Great American Weekend. Stay tuned till 9 o'clock. We're here to entertain you.
So then I tell the bartender, no, you keep the change.
Guys, I don't get it.
Ina, it's an American thing.
Learn more about American humor on Great American Weekend.
Yeah, we're here to learn basically everything about America, and not only because we live in Armenia. So this is the Great American Weekend. We talk about freedom tonight and the Black History Month. So freedom is good until your choices start to overstep on another person's freedom. What do you guys think, Aramast? I think you had something to share with us.
I think that has a lot to do with it. When I think about having the freedom to do or to enact your will or do anything, you do have it. Like if you wanted to do anything, you could do anything. But there are responses and then consequences to your actions as well. And I think the more heightened you are in your awareness of your actions, the more you have the ability to know when you are overstepping the boundaries of someone else's freedom.
Mm-hmm. The real kind of common American saying is the freedom to swing my fist ends right before your nose begins.
that was a good one.
Stephen, I never knew you had that side in you. I didn't know where
You
this.
bring it out. No.
You bring that.
Beware.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
Yeah, where my nose ends is where you begin, or something like that. It's something like that. There's a shorter version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite definition of freedom is, I think it was like the third or fourth. It was, again, a dictionary definition, but it had to do more with that concept of will and awareness. So it was the power of self-determination attributed to the will, or the quality of being independent of fate or necessity. So something out of the realm of destiny or out of the realm of need, necessarily.
Okay, so that's, I mean, part of that is fairly cosmic.
Choice in a way.
Cosmic in a way. I mean, destiny and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, in a way.
I've got a quote here from one of the greatest American presidents, who actually, I mean, tying into with Black History Month. I mean, this guy Abraham Lincoln,
Honest Abe.
Honest Abe had a huge impact.
Did you know that was his nickname?
No.
Yeah, his nickname in American history. That's what people call him, Honest Abe.
Abe?
He was a really honest.
What does that mean?
Honest Abe. Abraham Lincoln is the short.
Abe.
So his nickname was
okay,
Abe, and they called him Honest Abe because he was said to be a really honest guy.
So Honest Abe said, once upon a time, America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's,
I think it's a really wise quote for every nation, because what we do is, and even for an individual, what we do is we destroy ourselves from inside. No one can harm us until we let them to.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, it's relevance for every nation, but also every individual to really consider what it is that we do to harm ourselves. So as a citizen for a nation, but also as a human for one's soul, there's this responsibility to kind of understand what it is that we do.
Yeah, you can't have power over what happens to you, at least not complete power, but you do have power over how you respond to it and what you do.
Absolutely.
So thank you for this quote, Stephen. And
yeah, I think it has a big relevance for our theme for today, with Black History Month, and Abraham Lincoln kind of being the president during the Civil War, whose foundational reasonings were both economic and based off of an economy reliant on unpaid or really unfairly paid slaves.
Paid?
No paid.
Unpaid?
Slaves. Yeah.
Don't let's not try to sugarcoat it.
No, well, slavery as being the foundational reason, both as a human rights issue, more so for the North. We had a discussion about this before we went on air about how for the North it was more of a human rights issue, whereas for the South to abolish slavery was economic detriment.
Oh, so. Yeah. I mean, just you have to remember there was no mechanization back then. So these large plantations that they had in the South, which were really kind of the powerhouse of the American economy, producing cotton and tobacco and those sorts of things, and food crops like wheat and corn.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to function nearly as well and have America be as much of an economic powerhouse internally, but also it was starting to become a little bit more powerful on the international stage. And none of that really would have been possible without slave labor. As horrible as that sounds.
Well, I mean, in most of history, many colonial powers used kind of indentured workers to establish their riches or their cities. It was a continuation of something that was already established in Europe. But it sounds kind of archaic now if you think about it.
But throughout history, slavery was not uncommon. One of the things that was different about it with the slave trade to the Americas was that it was completely race-based, and it was seen as permanent. I mean, ancient civilizations like the Romans used to go in and invade a place, and they would take the inhabitants of the territory that they won or took over and bring them back as slaves. But at some point, those people could kind of integrate into Roman society, and it wasn't seen as like an eternal thing. But with slavery in America, African slaves, it was, these people are property, and their descendants will be property, and this will go on, forever.
I have a question regarding February. Why was decided?
Well, okay,
this exact month and
it was a guy named Carter G. Woodson, who now is known as the father of Black history. He was a historian and scholar in the U.S., an African American,
and an inventor.
He was? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that later, maybe. He suggested that February 1926, the week that included February 12th and February 14th, should be Negro History Week in America. And he picked that week because February 12th was Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and February 14th was Frederick Douglass's birthday. And Frederick Douglass is, an African-American intellectual, abolitionist, freedom fighter. And so they picked that time. And that was 1926. There were a handful of states that adopted the idea and tried to implement it in the public schools. But it was small. But from then on, it just kept growing. And so from fairly humble beginnings, 1 week in February in 3 states, it's now spread to a national institution that takes place for an entire month every year.
Thank you for this explanation. Now I see. Now I know.
What's interesting to me is that growing up as an Armenian American in New York, I would hear stories about the Armenian Genocide as told to me by my parents, and what the condition of Armenians living under the Ottoman Empire, in which they lived for about 600 years. And many of those stories included this second-class citizen experience, which unfortunately,
I see what you're saying.
Despite the representation of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, from large architectural projects to smaller ones, we are ready to go on an advertisement break.
Sorry,
we'll continue when we get back.
Save your thought. We'll be back right away.
Stay tuned. We'll be back on the Great American Weekend.
Hey, where are you off to?
I'm playing soccer.
You lost your sock?
No, I'm playing soccer. What you call football?
No, you don't say soccer. You say football.
Join us on the Great American Weekend and learn about different sports from America and around the world.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend on Radio Vaughn. I'm Master Steve. I've got Hazva QT right next to me. And
here I am,
Ina MK.
Ina MK.
So I've got a quote from Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history and the guy who came up with the idea of Black history, what became Black History Month. He said, "If a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated." I think that might be a quote that touches some nerves here in Armenia.
It's a pretty powerful quote, actually. He's basically hit it right on the button, and I think something I was sharing before the break was my own understanding of stories about the Armenian experience in the Ottoman Empire, and this second-class stature that Armenians played despite great contributions to the empire that they were citizens of. Like, our huge architectural projects being represented in the government, down to even the craftsmen, money exchange. They're inherent parts and parcel of the society there. And when I heard these stories growing up in America, for me, I thought, I looked around me and I thought to myself, well, who would be the current people, a minority that would be experiencing this second-class stature? And I saw very clearly, because during that time, I was 9 years old when the Rodney King beating happened, with police brutality being a major issue. And I think a large part of Black history has a combination of both honoring the greats that contributed to American history, as well as acknowledging the civil rights that had to be fought for in order to establish this sense of freedom that was needed for a large majority of people that had basically worked all their lives to build the nation, but did not really receive that type of acknowledgement as a people and as individuals for their contribution for the establishment of what is considered to be by Americans the greatest nation for them. So for us, so it's really interesting to have this personal Armenian connection to the experience of how I could empathize with the experience of what it's like to be Black in America.
So it's still there, I think. We still have stuff to struggle with before.
America is a great experiment. So there's always going to be things to struggle with, to try to improve, to better.
Yeah, the whole civil rights movement started after the abolishing of slavery occurred. So it was removed from the law that the ownership of another human being could not occur. That was not lawful. And so that became enforced, but the cultural aspects then ensued, which resulted in separate dining facilities, separate seating, separate water fountains, which continued something that was called segregation, which is a kind of a remnant of slavery, in that even though you have equal stature as a citizen in society, you don't have equal stature as a member of society.
Yeah, well, and it was, in different places in the United States, there were still what were called the Jim Crow laws, which were, you can't, that places can be, public establishments can be segregated. You could have white-only hotels. You can have white-only diners. You can have a place in a restaurant where the Blacks have to sit and where the whites can sit.
You know what blows my mind? It's like that was only 50 years ago, Steve. That was literally like 50, 60 years ago.
But even with
it's like a generation and a half.
Yeah, even with the Jim Crow laws being mostly in the South, there were other places, even in the North, where there weren't such laws, where it wasn't legal. It wasn't a legal thing.
It was a cultural thing.
Cultural.
Yeah. And
guys, I really, really recommend you to watch this movie. I know you haven't watched it still. The Green Book. It's
I've
amazing.
heard about this.
It's really, really connected to the theme that we chose tonight.
What's the brief synopsis of it?
It's about a very, very talented Black musician, pianist, who was also gay, and who wasn't accepted by the society. It was the times when the Black had their own hotels, the restaurants. He was once he was playing on the stage, everybody was admired and applauding. But then after that, he had to sit in a different small room.
Oh
to
yeah,
eat.
they wouldn't. The great jazzmen of
Yes.
America's past, they would play in an establishment, a bar or a concert hall. They wouldn't be able to come in and out through the front door. They'd have to enter through the back door and come in through the kitchen. When they were done playing their set, they couldn't go and sit at a table next to the people that were their audience. They would have to go somewhere else to have an after show drink or whatever.
It's awful.
Make
I
sure
really
you watch this, okay?
I'm going to check it out.
Can
It's
I
called
read
The Green
out
Book.
the quote?
The Green Book.
Yeah, The Green Book. Yeah, it's a really good one. Are we ready to hear Samuel L. Jackson's quote, or not yet?
Oh, well, I mean,
Because right after that, we're gonna
a lot has
go
changed.
on a
But there are
music
still,
break.
well, we have to go to a music break. But
pretty soon.
let's do the Samuel L. Jackson quote after the break. Because let's talk about, no, actually, we got to do it now. Yeah, share it, please. Because when I was growing up, there were the questions about, well, do we really need Black History Month? You know, we know about Martin Luther King Jr., we know about Malcolm X, we know about Frederick Douglass. We learn about these things in school. Why do we need a month all about Black history? And it fits in with this quote by Samuel L. Jackson, who a lot of you will probably know from the movie Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah.
What was the...
Pulp Fiction, Unbreakable.
Unbreakable, yeah.
So, you guys ready? This is what he says. We don't need a month for Black history. Black history is American history.
Yeah, it's totally true. I think that when I first read this quote, I thought to myself, well, there's, that's kind of a striking sentence or a comment to say, like, we don't need to have a Black History Month. But I think that seeing it as American history, which is something that Steve was speaking about with regards to understanding and accepting that the Black cultural experience or the African American experience is an American experience. And I think this is the primary reason for Black History Month, is to kind of educate and to raise awareness, not only for the civil rights struggles, but also for the inventions and the great contributions that Black people have offered, or people of color have offered, African Americans have offered to America.
I think Samuel L. Jackson, and I think I've heard Morgan Freeman say something very similar to that. I think they're absolutely right in spirit, and in the sense that that's where we need to get, where Black history is American history. Yeah. American history can't be told
where you don't label anything.
I mean, yes and no. Yeah. I mean, where you can't tell American history without having to mention the Black culture and the great Black, elements, artists, whatever, that have made huge contributions to it. But in some respect, we're still not there. So Black History Month is necessary. But, I'd like to say one of the places where it probably isn't necessary is when it comes to music. Because you cannot talk about American music without talking about the contribution of Black musicians, songwriters. I mean, they're...
Oh, yes. Yeah. Right. That's why.
It would blow my mind. So to talk about Black music during Black History Month would be maybe a little bit of a waste to me, because there's other things to do, because that's an example of where Black history is American history. I
think you're right. That all of that is something that's so palpable. Like all the musicians that we know, they're like inherent in our minds. But there are those surprising elements, and that of like the inventions that might be something global that we might not know about. That we'll talk about a little later in the show. Because
right now we're gonna listen to Billie Holiday, The Strange Fruit.
Yeah, right. This song is really one of my favorite songs. It's kind of the propping up our conversation about civil rights, and it speaks directly to a poetic description and song that is so moving, and with her shrill voice and with her message of what it's like to feel different. And I hope when our listeners listen to this song, they'll kind of pick up on that sense and feeling that she's offering, and then we can pick up on a conversation about the civil rights movement and their leaders and what they had to go through.
So, ready? Billie Holiday, Strange Fruit. Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend.
Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore? and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode?
Oh, what a must. Thank you for this beautiful poem. Hazva Cutie reading a poem exclusively for Radio Van, the Great American Weekend Show.
So, yeah, and that's by Langston Hughes, African-American poet, New York resident.
And all of us are kind of like loungy now.
which is odd because the last line of that poem is...
Or does it explode? It's so
explode?
powerful. You know, I read this poem on Langston Hughes' birthday in front of his house in Harlem. I lived there for about 3 years, and it really moved me, and I had to read it. You know, poetry, I feel like, is something where you have to read a few times to get your own rhythm with the words itself, to really own the words as yourself. And after about the fourth or fifth time reading this, I kind of felt this, you know, this sense of explosion, this frustration.
Sorry, but were you standing in front of his house on the street reading it out loud
yes,
over and over again?
To myself, yes.
Oh, to yourself?
Yeah, not as like not as a performance.
Sorry,
like this, no.
How long did it take before the cops showed up and hauled you away?
Nobody else was around. I don't think anybody else saw it as romantically as I did because it was his birthday. It wasn't his. Connecting this. You know, we just listened to Billie Holiday's "Strange Fruit," where again in that song you can feel this dark sense of separation, frustration, a buildup of a desire to be free.
I could almost physically feel the pain.
Yeah, she has a voice that can send shivers down your spine.
And goosebumps.
Just make it, yeah. And a lot of her songs will do that. This one sends a shiver down your spine for a completely different reason. It's just the way that she delivers these really chilling lyrics, really chilling and disturbing lyrics.
Guys, let's not forget about people who watch us and leave comments under our live video. So I'm going to read them out loud right now. Arine Sukiasyan. Hello, Arine John. How are you? So she says, damn. Steve, your voice. My God, your voice. Yummy, guys. And kisses. Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much, Arne, for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
I have some more, sorry.
Oh, there's more. Okay.
Yeah, there's more.
Okay.
Armen
Shavardian.
Yeah. Says, good luck, guys. Thank you, Armen John. Thanks for joining and listening to us, and hope we'll host you here sometime soon.
Cool.
Da-da-da-da.
So what this poem and this song that we just listened to is kind of pointing towards this time in America's history where civil rights started to become part of the forefront of the conversation in American society, and black people who had they're generationally been freed from slavery but experienced the oppression on a day-to-day basis through segregation started to ask for total equal rights. And emerging from that came two very prominent and powerful leaders that had a slightly different approaches to the pursuit for civil rights for black people in America. The two very famous, actually, ones. One that's more famous than others. Martin Luther King, who is known very well known around the world because of his message of peace, love, acceptance, perceiving a vision of equality for all men. Something that he did, which was really fantastic, is that he found in the Constitution what was intended to be almost a moral standing for the justification for seeking justice for black Americans.
Yeah, and if there are any of you out there that haven't heard his his "I Have a Dream" speech.
Oh.
Look it up. It's all over on YouTube. Just Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream.
It's so moving.
It's incredible. I mean, he was an incredible speechwriter. He was an activist,
A reverend.
well, yeah, and he wrote speeches that are almost like poetry.
Stephen, by the way, there is a special thank you from Irene Arakelan for the beautiful poem about caged bird that we earlier posted on our in our group. So you guys can also join our group, Facebook group, which is Great American Weekend Radio Van, and follow the posts, the news, and also some cultural pieces that we share with you. And these are kind of hints on what we're preparing for the following Saturday.
Yeah, Langston Hughes is one of the great African American poets. I paused and almost didn't want to say African American because, I mean, it's American. I mean, he's just incredible. And a couple of the other ones, Dunbar, and I shared his poem Sympathy a few days ago in our group. And then a poem that was actually inspired by Dunbar's poem Sympathy is the one by Maya Angelou, one of the great American poets who is still alive today. And the end of that poem it's incredible. I just want to read a few lines from it.
Sure.
The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Wow, guys, we need to have a poetry night sometime because I really enjoy this.
We will.
Yeah,
These
definitely.
guys are reading poems.
You'll have to stop us by use of force.
You know what I really like about that excerpt that
I'm
you
not
chose?
gonna stop you guys.
I mean, like those lines, Ina, if you really listen to them, it's that caged bird sings of freedom. It's really like the core of what the Black experience was like during a time where civil rights was an issue. And I think what's really interesting to me is, I mean, if Martin Luther King was the sense of love and unity, that kind of was the harbinger of equality for all people, Malcolm X would be the revolutionary, more of a militant approach. He, even though he wasn't a preacher in in the Christian sense, he was a preacher in something that was called the Nation of Islam. After he was jailed and released, he came out as an outspoken skeptic of the American government and law enforcement because of the consistent oppressive policies by Jim Crow laws. And his famous quote was, "by all means necessary," which is a revolutionary concept that's been repeated and turned into part of the manifesto for the Black Panthers, who fought for self-determination in such a way where they utilized the American Constitution's Second Amendment, which was the right to bear arms, in order to create something that was like a revolutionary group. And the Black Panthers, Huey Newton, who was one of their leaders, specifically pointed to the usage of the word panther. And you know why they use panther? Do you know why? For them, and he has a quote, an interview, the panther, the animal itself, when assailed or when attacked, it takes a step back first. It doesn't immediately react and attack. Wow. But if assailed twice, or if gone after again, that is when it retaliates. And this kind of speaks to this caged bird, the strange fruit, the sense of a dream being deferred. There's this oppressive, neglecting feeling that is going on here. And here arises Malcolm X with this approach early when he started his movement. But later on, after having a kind of a falling out with one of the Nation of Islam's leader, he joined with Martin Luther King, and they created their own unity together in order to achieve what was considered to be the heralding of civil rights for Black people.
And a great movie to watch is the Malcolm X movie with Denzel Washington
Spike Lee,
playing.
directed by Spike
Hey
Lee.
guys,
Yes.
I hate to interrupt you, but
Oh, no.
it's so interesting to hear your discussions. But we
She's
need
the adult in the room.
I know,
Yeah,
right? We
but-
just keep chatting it up here.
Behave. We're gonna have an advertisement break, after which we're gonna listen to Ray Charles hit the road jack. Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend.
Hey, what kind of fixins do you like on your hot dog?
Fixins?
Yeah, relish, onions, mustard, ketchup, condiments.
Conda?
No, not that.
Oh, fixins. I love chili dogs.
Learn about American cuisine on the Great American Weekend.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend on Radio Vaughn. I'm here, Master Steve. We've got Hazva QT, Ina MK.
Yoo-hoo!
What's
We're
up,
back.
guys? What's up? We're here in the studio, live and direct. It's Saturday night. It is 7:54. We're approaching on making some. We're going to be reporting on some news. We're going to be reading some headlines that's been part of the topic of conversation for this week from America, from Armenia. So why don't we get to it, huh?
Yeah.
Something that's been in the news this week, you might have heard about this. There is an actor from the show Empire. His name is Jussie Smollett, who apparently he had received a death threat that said, "Jussie, you will die," and it said MAGA on it, and contained this white powder that happened to be Tylenol.
Yeah, it turned out to be Tylenol. But the history of, MAGA is Make America Great Again.
Making
which
America
is,
Great Again,
You know,
which is-
Trump's slogan for his presidential campaign, his very successful presidential campaign back in 2016.
Yes.
And
So-
which has been now taken up by white supremacists and some fairly nasty groups.
Yeah,
so
pretty
that's the
nasty.
MAGA thing. But then the white powder goes all the way back to the days just after the September 11th attacks of 2001,
Or even
when
before
people
that.
were
Yeah.
sending anthrax in the mail to important people.
It's true. So this happened on January 22nd, but just about a week ago, just past week, there was an investigation into what happened was Smollett had been attacked, and he said he was attacked by two people who were of Nigerian descent, who both wore shirts that...
Oh, did he say that they were of Nigerian descent?
or they found out they were
They
Nigerian
found out,
descent.
I think. It was on the 22nd that he got the letter at work, basically.
And then February 13th was when the Chicago police were in pursuit of two individuals. So what happens
Yeah,
is...
the attack was on the 29th of January. The letter was on the 22nd.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, guys? Is this all true?
Well, yeah, it's not... So what happened was that it came out that potentially this was something that was kind of arranged.
Yeah.
So Smollett allegedly cooperated with these two extras that actually worked on his show Empire, and created this kind of sham beat-up situation because he wanted to, from his perspective, bring to light some of the issues that are being experienced by what the people who follow the Make America Great Again Trump approach to politics and societal issues, which sometimes includes racist opinions.
And, and
But it's
Smollett
not
is,
even-
of course, Smollett is an African American. He's also gay.
And that's kind of a double whammy.
Yeah.
To be African American and to be gay, you're basically the minority of minorities in the United States. And
And in the initial police report, Smollett said that the guys were wearing masks. They poured some sort of chemical on him. They put a rope around his neck like it was a noose. They used racial slurs, and they also used homophobic slurs.
And you know what's interesting is that it turns out that he actually might have actually paid these guys $3,500. So this is what I'm thinking, all right?
But, I mean,
this
it's
is
not
what
even
what I'm
proved,
thinking is
right?
like, well,
No,
yeah. So
but the
it's
police were
alleged. But like, this is
investigating.
what I'm thinking is like, what do we actually have with regards to any type of So if we're living in a post-truth society, like there's this whole concept of post-truth. So and there's a quote that we talked about this before we came on the show. V for Vendetta has this quote. I'll go real quick. It says, "Politicians lie to cover up the truth, whereas artists lie to reveal it." So here is this man who is
nice one.
he is black. He's homosexual. He is probably experiencing some type of prejudice and judgment and some slight or larger forms of oppression on a daily basis throughout most of his life. And here he is saying, the experience I have under a Trump administration and by the people who believe in him and his rhetoric and the way and his approach to leadership is affecting my life. Now, does that constitute what he did and the false report that he filed? Maybe not. But does it also bring to light the conversation that should happen and the conversation about believing victims in cases of racial prejudice or hate crimes? Yeah, that also comes to the forefront too if we have that conversation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the danger in art is art. And I'm not saying that to diminish art. I mean, I'm a believer in the idea that, art founds truth. Art is really what makes our zeitgeist, our times, and makes us think in certain ways and whatever. But to take a real life event like an attack and to file a police report, I think that definitely goes over a line.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just like,
I don't agree with the way he did it, but I do agree about the conversation that needs to happen, which is.
Hazva, are you sure that he did it? He still has.
I don't agree. I mean, if he did do it, allegedly. I mean, what I mean is, I don't agree with, let's say, lying about creating like a whole beat up situation. But I agree about talking about what kind of conversation is happening in America now under Trump leadership, and I agree about talking about what are equal rights and what is like having respect to another fellow citizen or human being that might be different from you. And I think that needs to be part of our lexicon in our everyday life, because otherwise what's happening is that we're getting more extreme, less tolerant, and just creating a very what do you call it when you get a violent
I'm not sure. And again, we're talking about all of this hypothetically.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to bracket that.
Allegedly.
I mean,
Allegedly.
I mean,
excuse me.
Innocent until proven guilty. But the way that the police went and found the two guys that were apparently in a picture or in a video that were supposed to be part of the attack, and finding out that, they weren't white racist rednecks, they were immigrants or
what do you
whatever
think? Do you think they should believe the victim? Do you think you should believe the victim?
I think it all depends.
I think
it all depends on the facts and the character of the different people involved.
I don't know. Well, what do you think? Do you think you should believe the victim? Like, even if you don't know if it's true, even if it's alleged, I mean, this is strictly opinion. You don't have to give like a politically correct thing. I mean, I believe that
reaction as a woman, I don't know if this is an emotional thing or something else, but my first thought is, what if he's not guilty? What if he's innocent? Then his whole life is kind of ruined.
Right, the benefit of the doubt,
he still has his presumption of innocence. Yes.
That is the very, it's an American thing. Innocent until proven guilty, right?
Yes. So until this guy is proven to be guilty, there is no need to fire him from work or cut.
Well, and that I think is crazy, because they cut him out of the last 2 episodes of the season because of these allegations in this court case. I mean, yeah, I'm comfortable with sitting here talking about it in the hypothetical that he did it, because the evidence is fairly strong, but we have to wait until the trial to find out for sure.
There was something saying that he wanted he wasn't glad with his salary. That's why he did it.
Yeah, I know, that's weird.
Yeah, it's really weird.
But I think there's apparently a check that he signed to these two guys for $3,500, and they're wondering why that. So there are a lot of questions. So I think it's worth talking about, and it's worth going into the hypotheticals of what if he did do it.
But more so, I think it's about MAGA. I mean, and the concept of MAGA as a people that adhere to this flamboyant and divisive way of speaking that Donald Trump has in his approach to leadership that is causing this type of aggression in American society that is, I mean, like his entire the FBI, McCabe from the FBI this week came out and was saying, I think that it's a possibility that the American president could be acting on behalf of Russia.
Yeah, and well, let me stop you here. The American president is he's basically a used car salesman. I mean, I was going to say he's a New
I could
York
see him as that role. Yeah.
He's a New York real estate.
I got the greatest car for you. It's a 1988 Ford Tempo, burgundy color of the wine, and we're good on time.
No, we're not.
We're not
we
good
gotta
on
keep
time.
moving.
You
But
know, Hazva, I
we've gotta
can't
get.
wait for you to do all your voices thing on air. But we got to give, moving.
But no, I want to talk.
the
I mean, at
next
some
news.
point,
Muller,
I was going to say,
we need it.
we have a New York real estate man as a president.
They're
And
the worst.
And well,
Have you ever met one? They're the worst.
I'm good friends with one.
Who?
And so why
A
I
New
want to
York
back
real
up and
estate one?
say they're not all this way.
I don't
but
know,
I
man.
lived in New York for
Majority.
3 years, and we did a lot of apartment hunting, not to buy but to rent, and they are so full of hyperbole.
Yes.
And hyperbole is you exaggerate beyond what's believable just to make a point.
Yeah, this is the
Just to get your-
It's the most beautiful apartment you ever see. It's filled with sunlight. It's got fantastic views.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
you
it's
know,
got
when
like
the
bars.
clouds clear up, all the sun will come in this place. So you'll
Yeah.
never need to turn on a light, even at night.
Yeah, but that type of exaggeration is slightly different. It's in order to sell something, yes, but when it comes down to leadership of an entire nation, we're talking about the presidency of the United States, and we're talking about the FBI coming through
Oh, and I'm not-
saying that he could possibly be acting as an agent of a foreign nation. We got
Yeah,
to really.
but you know what?
We
No,
need
here's
to.
my
Okay,
thing with
listen.
that.
There's a New York
McCabe-
Times article
No,
that really
wait,
quick,
hold
real
on.
quick, real
No.
quick. Just
No. McCabe, Comey, all sorts of people.
The FBI
have followed.
Yes, FBI
have
leadership.
followed Trump's lead, and are now using hyperbole just wildly. I think it's
I don't think-
believable that look. This
He said
week,
it's possible. That's not hyperbole. That is fact.
I think it's possible that
That-
Trump
that
is
is-
a Russian agent or
No,
Russian
no, an
asset?
agent of a foreign
As a
nation.
Russian
That's a
asset.
possibility. Yes, and he
Well, it's
is
always
in the
a
investigation.
possibility.
He's
it's always a possibility. I mean, nothing's impossible, right? But-
Professor Donatelli.
yeah.
Sergey
We gotta get-
Khachaturian says hi there.
Hi, Sergey.
Hey,
Thanks
Sergey.
for saying hello, man.
So, but I mean, the McCabe thing brings us back around, and you know, he's a Russian asset. Trump could potentially be a Russian asset, meaning that he is working for Russian interests, either willingly or because the Russians have some sort of leverage over him.
Let me
Hold on,
interrupt
hold
you
on.
here real
But that-
quick.
No,
real quick.
no,
The
no,
fact that you can
because we
say
need
that
to-
so calmly is very disturbing to me. And let me tell you why. Because as an American citizen, to have this one dialogue, two, that this concept is being put throughout the media, and
What
three,
gets- wait, what
that
gets
this is part
me-
of it, and the fact that we're so desensitized to it, it's huge.
You're not desensitized to it because you're getting all upset about this.
Well, I
Dear
need to-
listeners
I'm-
of
I'm-
Radio Von, I'm being oppressed by two American guys who ate the whole
No, we're
time.
Don't worry.
Sorry.
Don't worry. Next month
No.
is next month is Women's History Month.
Okay, thank you, because now we don't have any time for local news.
Or for the Muller Report, which is where I
Oh
was
man,
trying
the
to
Muller.
turn
Oh, let's go.
this.
Let's go.
No, we're not
We
going
don't
to do
have-
it
we don't-
because
no,
I'm
but-
going to read a local news, right?
Can we do the Muller report before we do? Because I'm really curious about this. Can
If you promise to behave.
I promise to behave, Steve. I
Okay.
want to listen. I want to listen.
No, okay. So, you know, the idea that you were fairly calm talking about an actor staging, possibly, okay,
Yes.
allegedly staging an attack on himself,
Yes.
right? You were fairly calm about that, but when we're talking about the president of the United States, you're getting all worked up about it.
Yeah,
Now,
only
hold
because
on.
the
Just
Americans are
let me keep-
desensitized now.
You guys have 2 minutes.
To a
Okay, go.
certain
I'm
extent.
going to be like
So,
2 minutes left, 1
next
minute.
week, next
I'm
week,
listening. I'm listening.
we will possibly
I love you, Steve.
have the Muller investigation wrapped up. And this will be, when it ends, it could be next week, it could be a week or two later. But the experts are saying that it'll be soon, quite possibly in a couple of days. And what the Molar Report was, it was opened over 21 months ago. They appointed a special counsel to investigate the possibility that Donald Trump himself or people in his election campaign were colluding, meaning scheming, scamming, making plans with elements of the Russian government in order to try to help Trump win the election. And this investigation has been going on for 21 months. There's been a lot of speculation about this. There have been some indictments brought against people.
Sentencing is ahead for Manafort.
And I'm not trying to downplay the crimes that Manafort and
Tim Flynn
and whatever
General Tim Flynn,
have been found guilty of, but none of them
General
point,
Flynn. I don't know if it's
none of them point directly to collusion with the Russians. Okay, and Robert Mueller, who is a former director of the FBI, who has a stellar, just incredible reputation.
Robert Mueller is the former
he
director.
Was.
Yeah.
He was put in charge of this. He was put in charge of this investigation, right? It'll be released soon, and we'll get to know some details about this.
I
and
can't
it'll answer
wait.
Some questions.
Hopefully.
And we'll
it's
see.
been going on for
so
long.
Next week, if you're watching the news and you hear about the Muller Report,
just
that's
know
what it's
that
about.
Stephen told you.
And we'll break it down. We'll break it down.
We'll debate it.
On this show after
guys,
it all comes out.
This is the Great American Weekend, and hopefully we'll hear a local news after our advertisement break. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Come back. We love you.
Oh, say, can you see?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
Adamast, what are you doing?
He's trying not to forget where he came from.
We're back in our studio, and yes, I'm not gonna let these guys talk anymore because I'm gonna do the local news. Are you guys ready?
We promise to keep quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys promised. But before we start, I'm gonna find them.
She lost them in all of our babble.
We've got some local news for you that's really interesting. One of them involves actually a hot mic with Armenian leaders and the U.S.
Well, what's a hot mic? And we've had that problem on air here, especially with our first episode.
These mics are so hot, especially with your voice, Steve.
Okay, thank you guys for backing me up. Now I'm ready.
Hot mic. A hot mic is when a mic is turned on and is broadcasting. It's on and it's broadcasting when you might not.
I love when you speak like that, Steve.
And I love when he explains stuff. So, guys, make sure while you're listening to our show, you keep the paper and a pencil ready with you so you can make notes.
And keep your mic hot.
Okay, we're ready. Armenian leaders question to Biden caught by CNN. This is the title of our news. So here we go. The conversation between Armenian President Armen Sarkisyan and the U.S. former Vice President Joe Biden has been spotted by international media outlets. CNN reports that the Armenian leader has asked former Vice President Joe Biden if he intends to run for president. Yes, in 2020.
Yeah, well, and people are already starting their campaigns. There are already, I think, 10 people.
No, there's
running.
more. I think there's like 20 candidates.
And I heard a whole discussion around this. Like there was a show on CNN where the hosts were discussing. What do you think he answered? Maybe he said he didn't have time, or maybe he said he's not.
There was a poll that 50% of registered Democrats want Biden to run, and I think that's great. I mean, I'm mostly independent. I lean conservative, but not necessarily Republican. But Biden's a great guy. He's a great man. He's got good character. He's funny. He's personable. He's a great guy.
You like him?
So I would like to see him.
If there was an old
run.
If there was an old man candidate, I would totally go for Bernie Sanders. if there is an old man that's gonna be in the seat, Bernie. Bernie.
Socialist.
I will.
People
Bernie
might be
is totally.
wondering why did we use this hot mics thing. So they started to whisper, and nobody heard what they said because.
Hey, Joe Biden, are you gonna run?
Let's go eat somewhere.
Yeah, let's go eat somewhere and talk in private. Nobody can hear us.
Because they had hot mics all around them. That's why
we
don't know what the conversation
so President Sarkisian asked out loud, "Are you going to run?" And all of a sudden they started whispering.
Yep.
Just in case there were any hot mics around, and there were.
So the rest is secret and in the dark. So catch this really short one. Next local news. Yes, Aramast, go ahead, please.
So here's a nice quick short one. On the occasion of Book Giving Day, Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, is accompanied by his wife, Anna Hakopian, bought a number of books, put their signatures on them, and went outside to present them to random citizens walking in the street. And I think this is a fantastic practice, and our government officials could do this more often, to have this sense and this pride of connecting with the people, and the fact that it's
See what a prime
kind of
minister
getting
we
out
have.
there,
giving knowledge out,
getting
to people.
out there and pressing the flesh.
Yes.
Shaking hands, doing that, pressing the flesh, rubbing shoulders with
Steve,
the common
when you
man.
keep speaking like that and all the hot mic business, pressing flesh, you really are kind of like, you're turning me on like a hot mic.
That's not what it means.
We also had Nikol Pashinyan attend one of the events marking the 150th birthday anniversary of Armenian writer Hovhannes Tumanyan, about which we mentioned earlier. Excuse me, in our show.
I love seeing so many people kind of sharing their favorite quotes. The droplet, a droplet of honey is my favorite.
We also had flash mob when the parliament people were quoting. They had a flash mob quoting their favorite lines from different poems by Tumanyan. So, and also our prime minister laid a wreath at the yard of Saint Gregory the Illuminator Church in the village, where the the celebration started. The Sech village. This is where the writer is from, and he bowed before the great writer's statue. I think this is a really good example for the younger generation how to honor. First of all, great people,
history,
traditions,
literature.
elder people. This is all in one. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Totally.
Thank you for this practice. Thank you for this.
So, and we've been teasing
example.
throughout the episode talking about great African American inventors. But unfortunately, we've been babbling on far too much. So we're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, because we are ready to host our guest.
But at some point, I'm going to have to explain to you guys what the real Mccoy means. That idiomatic
we're
phrase.
absolutely ready to hear
And
this.
it has to do with a great African American inventor.
So now we would like to invite Raffi to our studio. In a couple of minutes, we're going to enjoy his company and we're going to hear this story of a traveler and a writer. Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend. Yes, Aramast? We're ready? Go.
What's the best word in American English?
My all-time favorite word is but I usually refer to it as lovemaking.
Become more fluent in American English and slang.
Good evening, Yerevan. We were just listening to Aretha Franklin's Respect, part of our theme for Black History Month and freedom. Tonight we have our special guest, Raffi Ouzounian, a music journalist, former record label owner, and current world traveler and writer.
Hello, Raffi.
Hi there.
Hey.
How you doing this evening?
Splendid, thank you.
Raf, seeing your own described statement of studiously avoiding London for the past since 2014, it's something that's kind of inspiring. Someone who has this ability to kind of pick up and go where he chooses in the world, and to do that, it's probably such a great gift. And that concept of freedom that we're talking about for this episode, it must be something that you experience while you're on the road. Tell us a little bit about your experience for the past 5 years in traveling.
So I guess it all kind of happened by accident, to be honest. I came here for 1 month and then I just kept on extending my stay, and suddenly 6 months had gone by. But during that 6 months, I started sort of traveling in the region, and I went to Turkey for the first time as well, for example. And actually, there was an incident in Istanbul the first day that I was there, which kind of felt like I was essentially robbed in the middle of the night, and I was sort of held against my will. And somehow, over the next 12 hours, once I got out of that situation, somehow I felt like I was crossing some sort of Rubicon almost. And it was mainly to do with Turkey, but then it has carried on since then. And I've just...
So for our listeners, what, crossing the Rubicon?
Well, I mean, I found myself in Istanbul after this incident wondering... I'd basically gone to Turkey to not to try to do anything, but with a desire to go out of Istanbul and explore some of the places where Armenians once were. And, you know, I was 35 years old or whatever it was, and I had not been to Turkey before. And I found myself there, and this incident happened, and I felt like the universe was really putting me on the spot and saying, well, if you're serious about this, you know, you have to stop for a moment, and you have to make a decision about whether you're going to carry on, because it's not going to be easy. And we just made it very difficult for you. So I found myself one lunchtime dealing with that in my mind. And I decided to carry on.
Do you prefer solo traveling or?
Definitely solo. I rarely travel with other people. I mean, I love people, and traveling with friends can be very good. On the other hand, I like to be able to do what I want to do. And even if you're only with one person, you have to make compromises. And that's fine too. But I'm certainly someone... I made a decision a long time ago. If somebody is not ready or able or willing to do something, I'm going to go anyway.
So it's about independence and freedom. You're
not
at all
freedom.
a misanthrope, is what you're saying.
Not really, no. I have my moments, but but no, I'm a pretty happy guy.
Yeah.
Have you ever traveled with someone and felt like you could be totally free with that person that you traveled with? Was there ever someone that you've traveled with where you felt like you could do whatever you wanted?
Who's your best travel buddy?
Yeah.
I don't really have one, because I rarely travel with other people. I felt free with someone somewhere, but not necessarily on the road. I can't think of anyone.
The freedom ends when they occupy the bathroom. This is where the freedom...
The bathroom is the most important thing. Where can you go and rest, as it were, in the restroom?
I need some alone time.
So following this theme of freedom that we've been talking about, kind of a combination of both freedom and Black History Month, I wanted to ask you, what are some ruminations on freedom or free will or destiny or perhaps some kind of psychological, philosophical approach to being on the road and your experience here, let's say, being here in this world as a person on the road? I feel there, whenever I'm traveling, there's this opportunity to reflect on my experiences of the past and what I want for the future. And I'm kind of interested about what is your perspective on what the meaning of freedom is for you.
It's a good question. I think sometimes, you know, we're conditioned by society and our careers and so on to think of travel as a journey from A to B. And I was certainly a part of that exchange as well for a long time. But just because I started to make some changes in my life and so on and so forth, I found myself more and more inclined to just go. And I might give myself an endpoint in terms of when I'm going to go somewhere else. But certainly I was not planning to go to a beach and then go back to London, for example. So I think traveling for the sake of traveling is a sort of a philosophical concern in one regard, because it's different and people don't necessarily understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. And I sometimes come across that, and that's fine. I respect that. But I think there is a difference, yes. And that also means that you you're creating a space within yourself, a free space, where something can come into it. It may be negative, like that incident in Istanbul, but it may be very positive too, like carrying on from Istanbul, for example, if I would go back to that particular trip.
Name me what one of those positive, like if there was one experience where you created that type of space or that type of freedom for yourself through your travel that allowed you an opportunity to experience something totally. If I ask you what was your most experience that made the most impression on you during this 5 years of travel, what comes to your mind? The most impressive one.
I couldn't give you a most impressive one without sitting down and thinking about it.
Sure.
But if I've already been discussing that trip to Turkey in 2014, I can go back to making a decision to carry on my journey within Turkey, and then at some point a week or so later finding myself in the northeastern tip of the country, in the region of Ardahan, in a small town called Hopa, where basically half the population were Hamshen Armenian. And I had contacted someone while I was on the train that day, a contact whose information I'd been given, who did not know me, but was basically willing to meet me around midnight once I'd arrived, put me up in his home, and essentially sort of give me a fill-in on that place where I found myself, where I never imagined finding myself. Nobody knew I was there even, and I hadn't even heard of the place, a week earlier than that. So that was a really special trip. I mean, that stands out as a memory, but I could probably go into other ones when I found myself in Erzurum as well, completely unexpectedly, and having to think on my feet, as in, okay, hang on a minute, what am I going to do? When am I going to do it? And so on and so forth.
Raffi, I have a question for you. There is a saying, when in Rome, do as Romans do. Do you follow this thing, or...?
I mean, I think it's always difficult if you're not from somewhere, but certainly, for example, if I'm in Georgia, I will look to eat Georgian food. So that's a very superficial way of relating to that. But yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful to be able to meet someone who's from that place, because even if they don't necessarily show you places or take you places, you're sharing that space with them because you're relating to them as a person. Mm-hmm. So you're experiencing the Belarusians' idea of themselves as a person, as a people, as a capital city, or a whatever. I mentioned Belarus because I was just in Minsk for a few days.
I see. And what's the longest you've been away from home?
I think it's about 6 months. Last year, I was in London for 4 days between April and October. Mm-hmm. I had not planned to go to Russia, but I found myself there. I had intended to be there for 4 days, but then suddenly that essentially turned into 5 weeks. It would have been longer.
Just go with the flow. Yeah.
I mean, as much as possible. And the last 12 months, I've really been able to go as much as possible, as much as I want. Yeah, I found myself in that situation.
Cool. Thanks for your answers. Now we're going to have a short music break. We're going to listen to James Brown, Get Up.
Oh,
Sex
man,
Machine.
I love JB. I saw him live, actually, in New York, in Battery Park. Yeah.
Go home, Aramas.
This guy was like 65, and he had all these dancers on the stage. He was so alive. He definitely got up.
The Godfather of Soul.
So now baby. When we're teased by Aramas, we're ready to listen to hear the song.
Teased by Aramas with hot mics that are turned on.
Stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend, and we have a special guest, Raffi Ouzounian. Yeah, we're back in our studio. We're enjoying our song. And Steven?
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend. And we were just... The end of that song says so much about James Brown's kind of aura and personality and how he worked with bands. He was known as the hardest working man in show business.
Yeah.
He had the tightest band. I mean, he would give them directions on the fly on stage and they would just nail it. They were so tight, just like the end of that song. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And you think there's going to be another beat, but they all just stuff.
Events.
Like that. Like they're one thing. It's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephen,
Great
for this
James
comment.
Brown.
And a great song.
And we have another comment. Our faithful listener for about 3 years already, Irene. She says, "Your guest's English is so beautiful. Thank you."
Irene, that is
Irene.
Because
I
she
take
loves
take
the
offense
British
to that.
accent.
The British, they just do it all wrong.
Irene. It has something to
I'm
do.
sorry, Stephen.
Something to do with the fact that our guest is from England.
Yeah.
Wait, you were born in England or were you born in Ethiopia?
Born in England. My elder brother was born in Ethiopia.
So part of your heritage comes from Ethiopia as well.
Yes, my mother was born and raised in Ethiopia, yeah. She's an Armenian from Ethiopia, yeah.
I thought you said part of your hair comes from Ethiopia.
I mean, you know, who knows?
It's got some curls in there, yeah.
So part of
I get the Pushkin thing all the time in the former Soviet bloc.
Yeah.
And of course, he was part Ethiopian.
Right. That's true.
That's true.
That
That is true.
So, can you tell us a bit about your travels to America? Because this is the Great American Weekend.
Sure, yeah. I've been to the States a number of times. I have relatives on the West Coast in Santa Monica in Los Angeles.
Okay.
But in 2015, I kind of did a little loop around the States. I went from New York to Columbus to San Francisco, then Los Angeles, and then Nashville. And then on to Montreal on the East Coast in Canada.
Oh, you went all over the Americas.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I wanted to drive across the States, but at that point, it wasn't possible. I had to go to some weddings, and the journeys were just not going to work.
And
with the
plus that
weddings.
left wheel, right wheel scenario is
I think I
also
could
always
have worked
kind of
that
tricky.
out.
Oh,
Yeah.
you could have worked that.
I think that
The
could
thing,
have been
the thing with America is people get so, and I've met so many people here in Armenia who are like, oh, I'm going to go to the U.S. I'm going to go, for a couple of weeks. I'm like, oh, where are you going to go? Well, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, maybe someplace down in the South like Texas or Atlanta. I'm like, well, how are you going to get around? I'm going to rent a car. I'm like, you're going to spend all your time driving.
You're going to need 2
Yeah,
months.
Because
right.
it's huge.
Yeah, it is.
The
Yeah.
space.
2 weeks, just all the states. 2 weeks.
It
Okay.
takes 2 weeks to get over jet lag
Right.
if you go to the West Coast.
So what was your favorite place that you ended up?
I liked
See.
all of them. Nashville for me and Columbus were brand new. Actually, New York was as well, but I suppose culturally you have some sort of refracted familiarity with New York, whereas Columbus and Nashville, not so much. So it was a pleasure to go to those cities and see a little bit of them.
Well, what did you think of Nashville? I mean, Nashville has this kind of reputation as being the country music capital of the world. Was it that?
I mean, I guess it was, because there's that famous street, isn't there? And literally, like, every other shop front is a bar, and there's a band playing just on the other side of the glass wall, the frontage. So in that regard, yes. On the other hand, it felt like a small city, and I like small cities. I ended up not going to see a country show. There was another American artist who I was never a big fan of, but I was just surprised to see that he was still touring. His name is Andrew WK. And my friend was from Nashville, and I said to them, hey, do you want to go see Andrew WK? And she was like, yeah, okay. And so anyway, we found ourselves at an Andrew WK show, which I had not even done when he was super popular, in the late 90s. But it was kind of weird and cool, and I enjoyed it. And, it's always good to go to a show wherever you are on the planet, So it was a pleasure.
So you like small cities? You don't like London? Or
I mean,
what?
I have a strange relationship with London. It's my home. It's where I'm from. I love it.
Yeah.
And yet I don't like it very much. Yeah.
I love it, but I don't like it.
Yes. So this is only a more recent feeling, really. Perhaps over the last, 7-8 years, I've just grown a little bit sort of whatever about London,
So London is not your soulmate?
I mean, it's not my soulmate. It's not my soulmate. I'm very comfortable in my apartment there, and the neighborhood I live in, I'm very comfortable in. But we've had a divorce, yes.
Yeah, I see. Now I see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been
These
signed and
relationships
everything, or is
clear
it just
to
a
me.
trial separation?
I guess you could call it a sort of an extended trial separation
Okay.
I'm,
with clauses added.
It's a very creative way of putting it.
I guess.
I'm curious about that creativity actually. So I'm aware that you write, and I follow you on Instagram and some of your stories, and I'm curious if you have any intention for some collection of your experiences to be composed or gathered, perhaps in a book or maybe some type of digital experience. Is this something that you are considering? Is this something that you've thought of? And if so, how, what, give us a feel for what you might be thinking of doing.
I've had a few things sort of thrown at me, as in, you know, family members saying, so where's the book, etc., because I've been doing some research into sort of the family history from what is now Turkey. Otherwise, other people have said, you know, you need to do a set of postcards with the pictures you use on Instagram, and then on the flip side, you put down what you've written with some of those pictures. Other people, someone in London has asked me to go there and do a sort of a presentation just regarding my travels in Turkey itself and the stuff that I've written about it. So, you know, there are lots of these ideas out there and they're all cool. But the truth of the matter is that I'm enjoying just writing when I feel like writing, and posting. The only controls that exist on my Instagram postings are the amount of characters that I can use or whatever, and I love that, you know, because I used to write for music magazines, and I basically got bored of that, and I don't really want to deal with editors or deadlines or invoices. So right now Instagram really suits me. Well, yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, I never relied on that for my income because it was always on the side as I worked in the music industry. So I'm able to carry on very freely with that as well. And I wanted to move away from music journalism, and I haven't done any of that in a long time.
Raffi, when you travel, does time fly by really quickly? Or no?
Sometimes it seems to, and at other times it drags.
Because this is what happened right now in our studio. We're about done with the time
It's just flying
that
by.
was given
Okay.
to us.
Flying by.
And Raffi,
I apologize for...
no.
Waxing
We are really
capacity.
sorry that we cannot have you some longer.
No, not at all.
Make sure you stay. We will chit-chat with you after the show.
Cool.
Well, thanks for being with us.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for listening, if you were.
Yes.
We've got a few people out there.
Yeah, we have plenty. So thanks for being here in our studio. Hope you enjoy all your travelings and hope that you come back to Yerevan from time to time.
I do.
Stay tuned, guys. This is the Great American Weekend, and we are gonna be here for another 10 minutes.
I would never live in America.
Why not? Didn't you enjoy your time there?
Yeah, why not?
It was good, but it wasn't great.
Because you didn't know us when you were there.
Join Ina MK, Master Steve, and Hazva QT for a Great American Experience.
Every Saturday on the Great American Weekend.
Yeah, join us every Saturday.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend. We're going to wrap things up here tonight in the next few minutes. We've got Ina MK, Hazva QT,
And
What's
Master Steve.
Master
and
Steve in the house.
I need to take a
Master
moment right
Donatello.
now and wish happy birthday to my beautiful and lovely wife, Anna.
Woo!
Sorry
Happy
I have
birthday,
to be
Anna.
away for a little while today, but I'll catch up with you after the show.
You're such
Thank
a
you.
devoted husband.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for...
Master Steve Donatelli, a devoted husband.
So, 1, 2, 3. Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday
to
to
you.
you.
Cha-cha-cha. Happy birthday to you. La la la. Happy birthday, dear Anna. Happy birthday to you. Okay. And now
So
we're
what do
go-
we have next?
We have a calendar of events for the upcoming week. So are you guys ready?
Yeah, let's
really
do this.
quickly
Let's
so
do
we
lay them
can-
on us.
Here we go. So February 24th, we have Vahagenheit up at
I love this guy.
Trio at Enoteca Wine Shop. And distillery. So make sure you don't miss this event.
If you
save your time.
like jazz standards with a little bit of a twist,
Vahagenheit
yeah.
Bedyan is
This
the
is
man.
where you need
Yeah.
to go. February 28th is the Reincarnation Orchestra at Mezzo. I love these guys. I haven't heard them for a while.
Yeah,
so
they've got kind of a reggae vibe to them,
Yeah.
and they've got a
Reggae
huge
ska.
group,
Yeah.
reggae ska kind of vibe to them. Yeah, I
So-
dig them too.
make sure you don't miss this one as well. March 1st is Armenian Experience Quartet at Green Dragon Distillery.
yeah. And if you've never been to the Green Dragon Distillery,
Yeah, I
it's
have
the
never been there.
downstairs room
Uh-huh.
for Etnoteca.
Okay, so
it's kind of small. If you want to check out this show, and I highly recommend it, make sure you call in advance and reserve a table. But Hugh Snoots, he's incredible. Again, great jazz.
I'll have to check that out. I've never seen
Yeah.
it play before.
We can
He's
say
great
he's
'cause
the
he's in charge
classic
of the
of
Armenian
Armenian
Radio
jazz.
Orchestra.
You know,
the jazz
it
orchestra.
would be worth it to just stress again, because I've been to the Green Dragon Distillery, and it's kind of like this hidden place. So Green Dragon Distillery, located directly underneath Enoteca Wine Shop. So check it out.
Yeah, you go into the wine shop, and then you got to find the stairs and go down. It's got kind of a
Okay.
speakeasy vibe to it.
Let's move on to our March 2nd, where we can hear a concert dedicated to Tumanyan's 150th anniversary, and it will take place at Aram Khachaturian Concert Hall. So this is a little bit classic. Do not forget to honor great people, great talents, and always remember your culture and history. So now let's move to the theaters. February 24th, there is a performance for kids, The Frozen. It is at Sundukyan State Academic Theater at 2 p.m. Grab your kids and go there.
If I had kids, I would take them.
My son loves it, and actually he sings all the songs from this cartoon all the time.
Oh, fun. Now, it's translated into Russian, this one? Or this one's in English?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I think it was in Armenian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
nice.
Cool.
It could be interesting. And February 26th, we have the Best of Shakespeare play at State Puppet Theater at 7 p.m. Guys, I highly recommend to see this because it's something really different. It's awesome. It's amazing. I've watched it.
Because I've heard about this, but I've never
Oh.
gone to see it because I don't understand, like, the Best of
Steven.
Shakespeare. It's like a greatest hits
Yeah, I
album.
know. Is
Yes,
it like all the best
exactly.
scenes? All the best
The
scenes?
best and most popular scenes, but in a very interesting interpretation, plus amazing dances, choreography, special effects. I don't know how to say.
Is this in
it's-
English? Is this in English
This
as
is
well?
in Armenian, but you don't have to understand Armenian to watch it. So
Cool.
you guys can just go
Oh,
ahead
so the
and see.
Shakespearean texts are translated into Armenian.
Yes.
Okay, and
And,
they're-
and not
That
only
sounds so interesting.
It's really really cool, and also you just can get an aesthetic
Vibe.
vibe out of it without even understanding Armenian. So I highly recommend this one. And also let's move on to the movies. Catch this. Watch movies in English at Kino Park Yerevan Mall. There's 3 of them. So from February 21st to 27th, every day there is a little Battle Angel at 5:35 p.m. The Vice at 8 p.m. and premiere How to Train Your Dragon 3. No, we were actually waiting for this one because Sasha loves this. So 6:10 p.m. you can watch the premiere of How to Train Your Dragon 3 cartoon. Again, good one for kids. So this is all I have for now for the upcoming week, and we're about to wrap end our show. We have 2 minutes to go. You guys, I pass the word to you, and you guys wrap up. And
Well, I think the only thing that I'll add, just to kind of conclude on this episode about freedom, and also acknowledging kind of the great Black contributions to American history and the world. Part of our responsibility is to kind of to raise our sense of cultural awareness and bridge out from something that we might be sheltered in and know, in order to understand from another person's perspective. So that poem about sympathy that you had posted really had this true ring in me. And I think knowing what those contributions are, the inventors that have contributed the 3-light traffic light, or the super soaker water gun, or what was another one? The real Mccoy.
Oh, the real Mccoy. Yeah. So there was Elijah Mccoy, who's actually a Canadian-born free black who ended up in America, and he invented this automated method of lubricating a steam engine, a locomotive, and he got it patented. And I don't have my notes here. I forget. In 1872, he had it patented.
And there was a light. The lights also. Yeah.
No. So he had it patented, and there were other inventions out there similar, but his was so good that people would ask.
And useful.
People would ask and make sure, is it the real Mccoy? So Elijah Mccoy invented this way of lubricating a steam engine that was so much better than all of the other things out there that people would ask for his by name.
Ask for the real Mccoy.
And ask for the real Mccoy.
So the real deal.
The real thing.
Is
like
the real
authentic?
And
we here,
real.
We here at American Weekend are the real Mccoy.
The Great American Weekend is the real Mccoy. You heard it.
It's the
You heard it
real
from
thing,
Master
guys.
Steve, Master Donatelli, Master Steve.
And also Aramast, Hazva QT.
Hazva QT in the house with Ina MK.
And we're guys ready to
sign off for the week.
Sign off.
If you missed
bye-bye.
if you missed any part of the show, you'll be able to catch up Monday after we post it on YouTube.
And you all have a great weekend. Have a great Saturday night. Have a great Sunday. And see you all next week on the Great American Weekend.
And thank you, Sandra Gordon, for watching us from Armenia, Colombia.
From Colombia. Love you, Sandra.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Tune in next Saturday.